different tools do different things. And so the encase, FTK, differently or better. You may not have the same corruption that prevent you even from. So, as an example, before you can actually that we were just looking at. I may get a damaged. It's damaged enough that I right click and I say open drive files. There's no drive files for me. Our studios its job when you scan is to do everything. It's to carve processing. So I can right click, I can I can right click on it and actually words right here. View. There is a damage. See, there is damage here. You actually have something. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. We know we have this. We know we have. Doesn't know. It has no idea. And I know I want to do this. I can say scan. I can do not need. Then I can say records. I'm not doing anything else. I'm not carving. I'm doing these other things. Now this is very valuable. And so when I actually get to where there's some corruption in all the NTFS content, which will never it's in the MBR, we just saw it. So when I get about any more NTFS records, so what it's searching for, need to wait for the whole thing to be done because there won't be any more later. And so that's what it's doing at this moment, is just searching for those NTFS. No, most people would. I do it in RAID arrays all the time. Terabyte RAID array, because the first third, it's not even going to be a third, because it's only going to be at the max 5%. So if it's the content entries, and so the only chance there's going to be, my drive is so they may have NTFS, they may have FAT, they may have other stuff. So, and once you get far enough, you can actually, and it'll say I recognize something, and then you can look at the tree. So there will be a spot. And once you're physically yes, you'll have recognized, and then you guys get the example, right? If I want to be fast different ways and maybe get a better output or get something else, set up the same things. I can go down here. Cool. So now this doesn't give me all the I don't have to wait. That's entirely the point. It with array. That's what we'll be looking for. Okay. These things and figure these things out as you go. Now the other thing is too. You guys probably 8, 7, 10 do a long format drive. It wipes it. As a drive, there's no data. It wipes it blatantly. If it's a long format, yeah. So NTFS get corrupted as it's moving around on the thumb drive. There's a setting removable / there's a setting you can do when you're pulling out the thumb it back in, and it will do more damage than there is on fat. So it will damage and it will diminish the size. I've actually or so with me cause damage to happen. Look at if you want to. So I'll pass a copy because I had your distance learning thumb drive. It's good. And I had made images of ones that after the corrupt system, it corrupts things as you go. It also diminishes the size of the system that I have. Have you ever plugged a thumb drive in and of the partition is beyond the disk? Have you ever seen that? Partition entry point sector. So it diminishes the size. Though it with spare sectors, but older, dumber drives don't do it. When you physically delete content, an orphan is in the system, and that will show up from time to time, like deleted, but a file that goes with it. Now they'll show up like these carved folders that no longer know where the parent belongs. So have that sparse files. Does anybody know what a sparse file is? So file has all the zeros removed. Fundamentally, that's what it is. Pressing anything. So all it does is, if you have a database, you remove system. If it's files, will get rid of gigs of data. It will pretend it's 17 gigs, but it's zeros virtual. If covering it with RStudio and you it correctly, going to parse it, especially if you're correctly. Come back. You remember that old cases where you can't, in certain cases, move that actually exports it correctly, so you just can't go. No, just so instance, is what's happening in the sparse files. The Novell stuff. So sparse files have zero. Not have. So when you copy a file, you actually have a tracking it. Sparse. There's an option for sparse. So the NTFS file system, when you're exporting it and you're using exported box under it says sparse, and export and all your zeros will disk fundamentally, but you have to know to if you're doing it and then you switch over to NTFS, that image file no longer located. Might back in. People aren't using Linux on the secondary. Before about I had a perfect awesome. There's a guy who 2003, 2004, he got a grant to make a JPEGs and graphics have an algorithm that you could say, well, when I have fragmentation or I have a picture, find the rest of the picture by looking for what entropy. And so concept tool, and it worked amazingly. Actually, picture out, and you could see the image of your hard drive and data carving called smart. Look at the picture segment, search the rest of the paste the picture back together again, and export the picture. So it's called Android Photo Recovery. You can download the trial edition. They no longer will take payment. So it used to be $29. And a couple of months ago, they deactivated their payment. No longer take any payment or will allow you to buy this tool. It was really awesome, and it really is a fantastic tool. It actually did things nothing else would do. Because they replaced it. Guess what they replaced it with? Something more. Right? Yeah, so this is now the tool. It actually works. 40% better. Great for cases like child like that, because pictures that are incomplete of it, you actually can get them. They're not documented files that I know of that you can there. So, but they changed the price. Single user versions because they only had activate. You don't even have to activate. And we used it but it's a $29 application. This application that they have come out with, here it is. Here you go. You guys ready for the big surprise?
Yeah.
How much do you think it goes from when it?
Yeah, I was going to say 300. Yeah, 10 times the amount.
$200.
It's expensive. It's good.
I was
Dongle. I get a dongle though, please.
Yeah, you get a dongle. You get a
You
dongle.
made them do the dongle version, right? Yeah,
I didn't buy it. I have a serial number.
Yeah.
So the difference between the forensics version and the single version that used to exist is the only difference is logging. That's the only difference I could tell. It had logging. It would tell you which sectors it reassembled the picture from. That's the only difference. Data recovery, it was awesome because no one cares. But as long as they got their picture back. And it worked on RAID arrays too. You could take all 4 drives in a RAID array and you didn't even have to reassemble the RAID array. You could just put them in and mount them and it would go hunt them down. It would take it a while, but it would actually figure out even with slices when the drive was sliced up. So So at some point in time, I'm probably going to have to buy the $2,000 version. That's the problem, right? But you government people, yeah, you government people, you can. Well, yeah, I would get the dongle, but I'm just saying it is actually worth it. I have a few of them. Oh look, only $600 maintenance plan. Yep. So
That's the old 20.
yeah. You can download the trial edition, you can look at it, but they don't sell you a serial number anymore. But that is kind of what happens. So if you're used to seeing this, which all of us forensics people are, it really does work about 30-35% of the time. It'll get stuff from the drive that you can't get otherwise if it still exists on there somewhere. Terrific for fat drives. When you have fat drives that people were storing photos on, it would reassemble it through all the fragmentation. And it doesn't matter what operating system you had. It'll do it with Macs, it'll do it with anything. But it's worth it from that perspective. $2,000? I don't know. I have a couple of versions. I don't have to buy it for a little while, but that's your only other choice. There are some other people who made some other tools, but they don't work like this one does, and it doesn't do anything close. So there's just some notes of some other stuff in here. There's offline files inside of a. When you have a server, and you have a Microsoft server, and you have a laptop that's connected to it, you have an option in Explorer to turn on offline files. This is how you get offline files back. It's actually a tool Microsoft releases. You can copy the files from a laptop, put it in your own, and then change the permissions on it basically with this tool called CSC command, and you could recover them. And this usually happens when somebody's server gets stolen. So everybody's traveling, somebody's out for the weekend, the boss has some files on his laptop, and the server gets stolen, and you want to recover them from the laptop and put them someplace else because the server's now gone. That's what you would use that for. So we did these things. I already talked about the recycle bin. There's two ways this recycle bin is done. In Windows XP, they use this info2 file that I told you about, and I actually broke this down into the process. And then when you get to Windows 7 and Windows 8, you have this. You have two pairs of files. So instead of having this info file, they broke it down into two files. Your file is the R file. When you see $R, so this is what it really looks like. When you open up the trash bin, that's what it says. So that's what the trash bin says. It parsed that file and it shows you that stuff that we talked about, right? But this is what's really in the folder. And so if you're looking at this from a recovery standpoint and you go to the folder, that's what the items are. Now it keeps this extension in the file name, and there will be a $, and the R, and that's the file. Now if you want to know what the file is, you go and you look at the $I file. So the $I is only info. See 544 bytes? That's just the info. And there is a tool that's called rfidi. rfidi util is the name of it. It's right here. I wrote it down. There it is. rfidi util. If you run this little command line in the directory that the $I files are in, it will tell you all the data. It will tell you what it was, the date and the time, where it came from, the executable, the name. So you can figure all those things out pretty quickly and easily by just copying the files out of the recycle bin, saving them, and then running rfidi util against it and renaming a couple of files. Okay? The numbers go together. So if you look for $R 18A506, $I 18A506. Those are the two files that go together. That one is the info for that file. That's the actual executable. Okay? Or the doc file or anything else. So those are the things that you want to lift. These other things people know pretty well, like what's the difference between Windows 7 and Windows XP, BitLocker. Now here's the other thing. You can recover from almost any encrypted drive. You might not be able to read the encrypted drive. You can't read the content, but somebody has the key, right? Or if they don't have a key, then you're stuck. That's your real problem. So if a corporation calls you and they said, oh, well, we have a laptop and it crashed and it has BitLocker on it, you ask them, on the key storage server, do you have the key to unlock this laptop? And if they say yes, well, then you can at least unlock it once you've repaired it. In order to repair it, you can image it with a DeepSpar, with an Atola, with a PC3000. You can repair that drive just like normal. And when you do, Then if you get about 93% of the drive, it will decrypt. That's my experience so far. I've had a lot of drives that come in, they're encrypted. I can still clone them, copy them, do everything to them, and recover them, and that will work. But to decrypt the drives, I'm going to need that key. So if you don't have a key, I'm not even going to work on it. Okay? Everybody understand? You can still talk to the drive as normal. The only ones you can't talk to as normal are SED drives, self-encrypted drives. Those drives, you're stuck. You don't have much of an option. Western Digital Passport drives are encrypted by default on the Passport. The Passport drives are encrypted by default, and it's hardware encryption. There is also software encryption, so they have two levels. The Passport software, when you start it up, there's a layer that says, oh, do you want a password, do you want to encrypt it? That one has not been cracked. We currently do not have a crack for the software if somebody used their own key that I know of at all. The hardware has been cracked. The hardware right now, the easiest tool or the biggest tool from a hardware standpoint that has cracked it and will image it is the PC3000. The PC3000 has a Western Digital hardware crack that you can image through the hardware. Now here's the thing, it has to be the original drive, original board. So the board has an encryption chip on it. The key for the encryption is in the system area. Okay? So I can image a drive and copy it without the board, but it's encrypted. The key is in the system area. And unless you have firmware, you can't copy the system area. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if I repair a board, I'm going to have to move the encryption chip too. And it's got to be on the original drive. Because I could do a hot swap and I could get it to work, but what I will image is encrypted. So that's one of the reasons why you need a USB device reader that can do that. And to date, I do not believe either the DeepSpar or the Atolla can crack the encrypted component of the Western Digital hardware. But the PC3000 can. The PC3000, not the software, the hardware. The software, you're going to have to take the guy into a back room and beat the living crap out of him in order to get the password. That's right now, today. But their times may change. So, except for, you guys who might have a back door in. How's key escrow working today? Okay. Or maybe they just told you no. All right. Either way, you can almost always, PGP, all of these things work. You just need the key and the software to unlock it, as long as you can image about 93% of the drive. It works exactly the same as all the rest of our stuff. You just have the additional step of decrypting it. I do recoveries for banks and for some government agencies that will not give me the key. So the answer to that is I can recover it. I'll tell you how many sectors I'm missing. If I have more than 93% of it, you pay me, and I'll send you back the data that I have, and you can then decrypt it. Okay? And they pay me anyway. So there you go. It works. I do it all the time. All right, logical stuff. We've already been talking about this. Now, we're going to cross back over in a minute into the Linux stuff and NAS boxes because I want to talk about the RAID arrays. But I'm going to give you the quick spiel because it's pretty quick as far as dealing with HFS and HFS+. It's really, most of the time, amazingly simple. I call it the low-hanging fruit. It really is the low-hanging fruit. Macs, I can do a lot of stuff with Macs with little effort. Your repair of a hard drive is no different. The things we've been doing to repair a hard drive makes no difference if it's Linux, Mac, or anything. You're going to be repairing all the same stuff. So I'm going to tell you at least the things I do to get the HFS file system back or in some other way. And I've mentioned a few of them already. So HFS, the changes, we talked about it a lot already on Monday. So HFS is used across all of the Apple devices, iPhones, everything else. Anybody dealing iPhones already knows about HFS and is not shocked by anything already going on. Some of the basics things that are changing the file system have absolutely nothing to do with the file system itself. It has to do with storage and the other stuff they're adding on that they're just filling up the drive with. So 1985 all the way to 1997, HFS, then HFS Plus is a wrapper around a version of Linux, basically, or a version of Unix is the better term, BSD and Darwin, and contains an additional amount of data that is focused on whether or not you have attributes or not. And then they added journaling. And when they did this back in the day in 1997, when they made the wrapper, anybody who had an old classic Mac that had been using it for 13 years at that point, if you plugged in from the new Mac a drive that you used, you got this screen. This is the screen that showed up. And when you read this document, it said you must upgrade your system. It had to be like an 8.6 or something like that. And that's where they started adding in, because technically there was no version 9. We went from 8.6 to 10. And I don't think there was a version 9 at all. Anybody remember version 9? I mean, there was only 3 people using a Mac in 1997. So I don't know if we could find that or not. And it took them 3 years to release OS X 10. And then that was the next step operating system that had been converted into a pretty GUI and Mac OS. And multitasking, command line prompt, everything else. So where have all my files gone? And it says it in the bottom of this thing. It says you must upgrade blah, 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 and do whatever. So what you're looking at is it's a B tree format. All the way back to 1985. It's a B tree format. And it's a balanced tree. Starts at the root, has a hierarchical system, and it balances it as it goes down. So physically, at least from this standpoint, starts with the node, and then every time that the nodes expand, they all wear level together. So they're always at the same level. You don't have one tree that's longer than the other tree. It'll level them out automatically. Now, as best I can tell with all my testing, is it happens between 7,000 and 10,000 files. They consider it to be 2/3 full at 7,000 files roughly. And then it starts to wear level, so it has enough space to grow before it reaches 10,000 files. If files have been reallocated and renumbered, it will reuse numbers. So unlike inode tables in Linux where they don't reuse those numbers, they reuse them in Mac OS. So you can have a new file that exists with a number that's low and lower than a file that is older than it with a higher number. Does that make sense? Which you can't have in Linux. So you can figure it out from Linux where those are, because those new files won't exist with a lower inode table number. Right? Everybody good? So it starts to split and starts to divide it up, and it's daisy chaining all these pointers and all this function together, and then it's storing data. It stores a lot of data inside here because they didn't have a registry. So all the content associated with the file system that would have been pre number 10 before the OS X release was stored there. And a lot of that content included, and it has a lot of the same stuff. It actually looks very similar to NTFS in some ways, except for the actual structure of the layout, but they're called catalog nodes. And the catalog node ID has content for its parent directory, the root of the directory, file number, and extents, which are continuation, like continuation to run on clusters, catalog file, and the file numbers, and allocation tables. It also stores date, time, size, blah, 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 but it stores additional data in addition to your normal metadata and the things you're expecting. It also stores the X and Y coordinates of your Finder. So when you're on your Finder, those windows, if you actually look at the content in them, you'll actually see that there are locations where the Finder's info, the position of the scroll bar, where the stuff is. So when your Mac restarts, that it can open those windows back up where they left off, or it can know the position and what screen it's on, if you have dual screens and things like that. And so they track them per file. So you have a number, a file number, a name, and then these will be the resources as it breaks them down. You can actually see this fairly simply with a free tool that's called HFS Explorer. And so you can look inside the content itself and actually scroll this. It's actually one of the few tools. So Incase will parse some data, Xways will parse some data. You can actually see some of this content as it's displayed, kind of similar to NTFS. But there's a Java tool that was written, it's called HFS Explorer, that parses the catalogs and that lays it out in this function, so you can actually see what's turned on, what's turned off, what the date and times were, what all the content is, and the entire tree. And you can actually see it makes logical sense as it breaks them down as it continues to go through them. So some of the trees may not reach their full 10,000. They shouldn't reach their full they split once they're considered two-thirds full. So once these things are broken down, the other thing is too, these are some weird things that happen. I've already mentioned these. After Mac OS is booted, 20 megs, any file that's less than 20 megs within 3 minutes starts to defrag. So it actually keeps them contiguous. You have very little fragmentation. If you go and you carve a Mac for JPEGs, they're almost always intact. They're beautiful. It's actually very easy from a data recovery standpoint until we get to encryption. So then we start having that problem. I know it also looks like a Mac is using a database to keep track of those files, but it's actually not true. I don't know if how many of you are using Macs? Half of you? Okay. I'll show it in a second. So, depending on the number of files, whatever else happens, it's going to reallocate and it's going to lay that content out. This has changed. I need to change the screen. In earlier versions of Mac OS, if you took a folder, if you're pre-Mountain Lion, if you took one folder and you dragged it to where another folder was and it says, do you want to overwrite? And you said yes, it would actually release the first folder and then copy the new folder over. But Windows people got really mad, and especially as they were starting to buy this, because we weren't all Mac people until a little bit later on. When they started using it, that function on a Windows machine merges folders together. Files that were in the folder that did not belong and were not part of the subset of the first folder, they were gone. And so the first time that you do this, you lose files. You would drag it, the inode table would release the folder, your 3 movies that you pirated will be gone, and the 3 new movies that you were then bringing in would overwrite those, and you would lose them. Whereas now, they merge. And they do exactly what Windows does. Because technically what Windows does is actually wrong by command, right? So do you want to overwrite? You say yes. It actually will then merge the 2 folders together unless they have files with the same name inside the folder. You guys understand what I'm saying? Now Macs do that as well. So the only other real huge difference right off the bat from a Mac is that they changed the counting system from a base of 10 to 2, so that you actually now have you're equal to your drives. So if you say 1 gig is 1,000, or you say 1 gig is 1024, Macs say 1,000, Windows says 1024. So the counting system is different. You can make it the same, but you just have to go outside of Mac software to do it. So let me show you a couple of things, at least dealing with Macs on a day-to-day basis. Now, understand, most of the time, if HFS is corrupt, most of the time, other than repairing the disk, the few times I have to repair it, I'm going to try to use Mac Drive, or I'm going to use RStudios to recover content from Mac OS. It almost always works beautifully. I will use Mac Drive first because it will maintain the file structure better than most of the data recovery tools. Data recovery tools will keep all of the files that are resource forks and things like that would normally be considered a resource fork as individual files. It will kind of look like a zip file got unzipped. Does that make sense to you? So, and the reason is this. So, in the Finder, you have a folder such as pictures, right? And then pictures will have a photo, and I might not even have any photos on this one yet. This is called a package. This is a package. It's not a single file. It looks like a single file. The system treats it as a single file, but it's not really a single file. The operating system is rootkitting itself, basically, again, to treat it like it's one item. And so what's actually in here, if you say show package contents, you will then see the structure of the folders that is inside of it. So the package system is not a zip file, it's not compressing, it's not doing anything. It's just packaging it all together. If you use a Windows system to recover the data, that's the structure you get. You don't get this other structure. So you'll have to go, like, one of the other things that you would normally do is you would just come in here, you would export your JPEGs, and then you would reset those JPEGs back in. So you would physically at least have to go get your pictures and put them back in. So you could import them back into a system. Now what you lose in that is all the catalog information and the other stuff that you would normally do. So there's 2 ways you can normally do it. If you use a Mac to handle it, it will maintain its integrity. If you use Windows to handle it, you'll have your pictures and you'll have your data, but you may have to manipulate it or suck it back in. But it is still an individual item. It's not in a database. It just looks like a database. Does that make sense? It's very important that it's not a database, because if you had to recover the entirety of a database, we would be stuck with what happens when we have PST files that are corrupt. If you have a PST file on a Windows system, which is your mail, and it's corrupt, and it's huge, and it's 30 gigs, and something's bad with it, it's potentially possible you lose it all. You have a lot of work you have to do there. So this is what the file system's going to look like when you're recovering it inside of a Windows system for a Mac. And that happens, it happens with movies in some cases. So in movies you have library files that would also be here as well. So I don't have a lot on this system. It's a new system. But those are going to be some of the things. Pictures. The iTunes library is not handled that way. iTunes is already staying as a regular system. And so all of these items are still continued to be broken down into their individual items. So they're not a group like the other ones are. Okay? Now, this is just a pretty interface sitting on top of a Unix file system. And the Unix file system is super powerful. So if you were to run terminal, you have a lot of power sitting here at the prompt to do a lot of things. And so you can do every single thing just about that you can do in the GUI interface altogether. So, but you have to learn and deal with your Unix commands and your file system commands. So here's what I can tell you if you have to deal with them. Because there's some commands you might want to do if you're controlling a data recovery. And one of them is called disk arbitration. Disk arbitration is the automatic system that mounts your disk and gives you read-write capability when you plug it in. You may want to turn that off so that, like the Windows file system, when we make 55AA, 55BB, that it does not mount it and we can still play with it, so that we can do recoveries without tying up the drive. Do you understand what I'm saying? You have to turn off disk arbitration so it will show up and not auto-mount. So there is a tool that is a free tool that is super easy to use called Clicks. Clicks. It's a part of RISC, RISTEP, I think. There it is. So RISC is a company that makes tools for Macs that add power and add flexibility to your system. And so they have a whole slew of content that you can buy. So they have a whole big, large handful of tools where you can pull apart HFS file systems. There is one book on HFS file systems also, by the way, OS X, and there's a file system book that goes with that has a breakdown of how OS X works and what that content is. It's very hard to kind of get all your hands on all that stuff, and I'll still look for that DVD for you. But from that standpoint, there's a lot of tools in here. Now, one of the tools that you'll want that's free is this one that's called Clicks. And so, and I didn't even add it back on this machine yet. So give me 1 second and I'll download it. And I'll show you what it does. So Clicks is a little app that looks like this. So then you can open up. You can open up these files that come with Clicks. And I have it in. Hang on. Downloads. Look at all these movies. You can. Where is it? Clicks. So there are command files, and these are done by version. So you can keep going through all the versions. You can go and find whatever you need. Obviously, they haven't updated for the newest versions. And then these are the items that have been added on for commands. So I'm going to go back and find one of the previous or older sets that has a pretty large subset, because there's some that will have disks, like this one. And so desktop disk. So what these are is these are the equivalent commands. If you're coming from a Linux world or a Unix world, Apple sometimes changes the command that goes with these Linux commands, okay? So they might be slightly different and you may not be able to get the syntax right even if you know them. So in these particular instances, you'll see that there's a list of disk commands, and so causes disk arbitration, blah, blah, blah. And you can deal with your disk arbitration in those commands. You can search for it. It will also execute it. So you can actually do an execution from here by double-clicking on it, and it'll actually execute the command line with it, or you can modify it and kind of script it. And so if you don't know the commands to deal with a lot of things, you know, if you want to deal with some of the settings, you can turn on and off certain functions. This is a great tool to get that content because it's like buying a book that has every command in it for Mac OS. And as you add them and use them, they'll all be here. So there's really a lot of good reasons to use this tool just to get that done. But I'm just giving you an option when I'm dealing with it. It's something that I have to deal with all the time. The other one is RStudio is available for a Mac. You can actually buy RStudio and run it on a Mac to do recoveries on other tools. I still find RStudio on a Windows system, even if I'm recovering a Mac, to be better. And that I don't have to deal with some of the items I have to deal with in Mac OS to make that happen. So those are some of the main items that I end up using most of the time. Once you actually have the structure, this is the other thing, almost everything in a Mac, almost 100% of what you're looking for is the user's directory right here. Now they started hiding some directories, so not every directory is visible in the system here now. Libraries and some of the other ones are not always visible under certain conditions. So almost everything you want though, because if you go outside the user's folder, everything you have to type in a password for gets really annoying really fast. So when you're looking at this, you have two basic things. The library system, if you're coming from a Windows world, you have applications that are for everybody and applications that are shared only by you, okay? So this one is for everybody. This is everybody on the system can access this applications folder. They don't really need you to recover the applications almost ever. We would be happier to just download the applications we need as we need them, because these are packages again, and almost every one of these utilities will be great just downloaded or just drop right in the directory. Doesn't require an installation. A few of them will have serial numbers, but the serial numbers aren't here. Now, one of the things that you might need, the only thing you might need from here is if you have like Adobe or some of the other tools, inside of these packages they will have the add-ons for those. Let me see if I've got, like, here's iMovie. In iMovie, I'm going to go look at the package. And inside of there, you may see that there's plugins. That would be the only folder that most of those tools ever need. So if people are running Adobe, Lightroom, graphics, any of the other stuff, inside that package is when they put their filters and their plugins for all the graphics tools. Okay? Otherwise, you don't need to copy any of the application folders unless you absolutely have to. Okay? Or if it's easy. If it's corrupt, forget about it. Okay? So the other thing is the library folder. This is the global folder. This is the equivalent of the Windows system folder. It has fonts, it has all the other stuff. It also will have serial numbers that are used by everybody. When you install an application that has a serial number, it will say, do you want this to be for you or do you want it to be for everybody? If you say everybody, it'll ask you to type in a password. If you type in a password, it will store a plist file under one of the directories, usually, it doesn't have to be, but usually application support. And there will be a plist file that has a serial number in here.
Sorry, I just fumbled.
It's fine. Okay, so your serial numbers will be in here. If I copy over these folders, this folder and the one from a user directory, most of the time I don't have to re-enter serial numbers except for Microsoft Office. That's usually the big one that I always have to deal with. Microsoft Office still found a way to screw you. So, yeah. Yep. And then, again, system, most of the library stuff, this is going to be the stuff for everybody. Inside your user folder, you then will also have an applications folder where you can put your local applications you don't want anybody to have access to. Then you can also put under, see, library is not showing up in this folder. It's only because it's hidden. Let me show you what I really use, because I really don't use Finder. Gosh, I don't like Let's see if I can have access to, but since it's new, I didn't turn on every item yet. But there's a button somewhere that says, I'll show you some of the settings as I'm going through it. So this is a tool that's called Pathfinder. Pathfinder is very similar to the tool that I use on the Windows systems that's called Directory Opus. I can do split screens, I can do tabs, I can do stuff below and above. I recolored everything so I can see it easier. And so physically, that's probably Joe who was in here before. We should connect to him and be like, hey Joe, what's up? Right? Send him a message, break into it. So this is Pathfinder, and it has a lot of power for me to do things. I even have previews and things I can do. Not that it's necessary here, but this is kind of the structure and the things I work on. And then Pathfinder itself and its preferences has a lot of things where it can kind of kill or get rid of stuff, and I can do some custom things. And if somebody sees the one that says show hidden, let me know. Probably have to look for it. One of the other things is to switch between base 10 and base 2. So base 10 being that they're counting by 1,000 and base 2 being that we're counting by 1024. So I have the option to switch. So if you want to get outside of Mac OS's things and you want to get a good estimate, this really bothers you when you're copying a big file. If you're copying a 30 gig file, it's not 30 gigs to a Windows system, and you're used to counting it like that. So there are things that you can add or change. And then I also have the dual panes as well. Don't compress invisible. And then so again, there's going to be a lot of other settings. These are things how I manipulate the system pretty quickly so I can get through things. But so you can actually do some different things, verify copies, whatever else you want to do. And then I don't remember if I have. So I'll have to go find that hidden one. There's also a view for every single category. So this is physically at least what I'm crawling through when I'm doing this kind of stuff and walking through the system. So, but there is a folder in here that's a library folder, and that library folder contains the same thing as the root folder, but for you only. Your serial numbers, your content, application support, huh?
You should be able to get to it.
Yeah, it's off of the...
Here, go connect folder. Yeah, go connect folder will get you there.
Where?
Under the go menu.
Oh.
Connect folder, bottom. Go to folder. Go to folder, yeah. Tilde. / library. Yeah.
There we go. So that I can just, you can turn it off somewhere on one of the preference menus. I just don't use Finder every day, but I remember it's on one of the menus.
Yeah, and I said it once and then I forget how to do it.
I'm not a huge fan of Yosemite. I have a few problems with Yosemite. I'm only recently trying to use it as a machine, but not a big fan of. I'm having problems with the transitions switching between things. They fade in and fade out all the time on me, and I can't see the boxes. They change colors all the time. I don't know if you've had this. The other thing is too, I don't know if you noticed, but for the last 2 days when I switched my A box and B box, the old machine kept the view up of my slides, and now it closes them, and I have to reopen them every time when I've been switching, every single time. So I'm not terribly impressed with this machine either, 1.2 processor. So inside the library folder, there's application support, and then this will also be like the plist and the content. If you have serial numbers, if you have things that are here, they're going to be specific to your settings and content. If you copy these folders over or use the migration wizard, it will take all of your serial numbers and your content with you. So you do not have to keep reinstalling everything except Office. Except Office.
Some of the Adobe stuff can be weird too.
Okay. I haven't used many. I've used Lightroom primarily.
Yeah, like
I don't.
Creative Suite. You know.
The whole Creative Suite. Yep. So because it does an activation thing at the beginning.
Yes.
That's what Little Snitch is for. To block calling home.
Little switches, it's like always up.
Yeah.
Because you realize how much stuff is talking.
Yes. Yeah, but it's really awesome because here's Little Snitch running and watching all my stuff that's connected while I'm online and showing my transfer. This is the only way I can get any of this feedback. And also I'm running iStats up here, which is pretty awesome as well.
It's great.
And but Little Snitch is what firewall should have been in Windows, which isn't. There's no way to block all communications in Windows. Windows decides I want to phone home. It will phone home whether you have an application or not. It'll bypass your filters. I don't know if you know this, but Little Snitch doesn't. And then there's another one called Keep My Hands Off or something. So anyway, so these are the kind of things I'm dealing with. So all I have to do almost always, if anything, is just get the user folder. Once I've got the user folder, I can re-implement, reinstall, and move the stuff over, and I can actually maintain. It'll do everything: pictures, desktop, icons, and so it's the migration wizard. And there's one downside to running migration and migration assistant, and I don't want to click the next box because a lot of times it'll actually log me out. And so there's a migration assistant. And all you really have to do is take a hard drive out of your system, put a new hard drive in it, reinstall the OS. 45 minutes later, plug your drive in, hit the migration assistant, and it'll suck over the entire user account, recreate the whole thing for you, put it all back together, and you can walk away. And so if you're going to do this on Mac, sorry, it's going to happen. If you're going to do this on Mac Drive, see the abuse I put myself through for you guys? If you're going to do this on Mac Drive looks like this. So Mac Drive can see anything, and it's really awesome if you're going to mount volumes, systems, a bunch of other stuff. Mac Drive is really just a little driver that's running in your tray. And Mac Drive has this little configuration for options, and you can choose to do a couple of things. Now here's your problem on a PC with a Mac. Macs can have characters in their file names that we cannot have, okay? If you export and you use a tool, free or paid, you must use a tool that converts the file name characters to one that a PC can support if you're going to use a PC to export it and re-import it back into a Mac. Okay? You guys understand the problem? So in this particular case, that's the button. File name is the backup and transfer. That actually converts the name on the fly so that the characters that will not fit will actually be preserved. So you actually need to do a backup. Otherwise, under normal use, it'll actually just bomb. All of your tools, they'll just abort when they get to a character that they can't handle. Almost all of them. So even you can do it in RStudios, but you have to do it manually. If you do it here, it's always done. So you could just plug it in and use Explorer to actually copy files off if you want, because there's no security. So you have no security to worry about there. So, and then you also want to set read-only. You want to set all your notifications and everything done to read-only. So there's a read-only button as well. And so, so this, once it's done like this, any Mac drives will just show up in this list. And they'll have a little apple next to them. Instead of this little question mark, there'll be a little apple. And then you'd have access to them and you can copy the data off. And it will convert them through this driver on the fly. If you are in RStudios, now since RStudios it looks exactly the same no matter what file system you deal with. But if you're doing this and you say that you want to recover files from here, let me do this. And I'll just, because it doesn't matter if it's a Mac or if it's anything else. When you go to actually recover content, and I say I want to recover this box that pops up, there's a couple of different ones and there's an update. You hit advanced, you tell it rename any invalid symbols to something else. So that's how you get rid of the bad characters, because it would abort as you are exporting from a Mac. So you could change your characters if you run into any and have it just be something else. So if you want to change your character to something that you can then search for because you know it renamed it, that's the problem with dealing with those. Okay? That's also a Linux problem as well. So when you come from Linux, you have to do that as well. Everybody good? So that's really the tools you want to look for. FTK Imager will export Mac files, but if the file names are screwed up, it will abort. And there is no setting for FTK Imager. So FTK Imager can do a Mac hard drive for free and export it. So I can literally physically open up FTK Imager and then go find sorry. So I can open up an HFS file system after I've recovered it, and you'll see it, and it'll be here. But any of these characters, anything that's not supported as I'm going through the file system, these things will fail when I export. So this is one of the things you at least can do to kind of get content out for free. So the files that do exist that are in the system that you can do for free, it will export them. But without some other tool, anything that uses another file name, it will not work. Okay? Everybody understand? Now the tool that I was using, if you want to actually understand the catalog system, on the laptop in front of you, there is a tool that says HFS Explorer right here. This tool is free. It's on your desktop on the right hand side. We're going to open a Mac image so you can see what the catalog looks like, but it's good for informational purposes if you ever need to go into it. Like these are images I've made and recovered, and once you have HFS running, you can actually parse some of this data. So if you double click on it, HFS Explorer is Java. It is 100% Java, and it has to be Sun Java. So you have to install Sun Java on whatever you're going to use it on. Not any other Java. Sun Java. Okay? Everybody good? Or Oracle Java. Whatever you want to call it. Okay? Now we're going to open. We're going to go File, and we're going to load File System from File. Load File System from File. Okay? Now, see Data Recovery Images, Mac OS X, and then Mac OS X Boot. And inside there is a DD image. You see the DD image. Mac OS X Boot and DD image. That's what we're looking for. Everybody good? Everything's under Data Recovery Images, and then Mac OS X, OS X Boot. You guys good? Wilson, David, you guys all right? Good? Yeah. Okay. Once you're here, say open. Now you'll notice there's a couple of partitions, and we already know which one the HFS partition is. If you needed to know anything else about it, I can tell you it's at sector 409-642. That's where it's at in a partition. When we're looking at it in hex, 409-642. That's where it sits. So that's where that partition is. So there's a partition map, and then there's some free space, and there would be a patch partition on some of the newer ones. All right, so once you say OK and you open that, you just leave it the same and open it. You'll see that there's a lot of files and a lot of things that we normally might not see or talk to specifically there in HFS. You can even see like the volume private data tables. So you can investigate this content. But the value of this tool is really not this, because you have a lot of tools that you can export files with. The value of this tool is this one. Go to the top where it says Tools, and it says File System Info. This is where I always find some very interesting statistics if you want to look at stuff. Now, other forensics tools parse data, but in my opinion, nothing really breaks it up into something that makes a lot of sense. You have to like plunder through all of the forensics data to kind of find what you're looking for. I've not found one that displayed this much information. Anybody else seen any other tools for HFS that display this much information? Ever? I have never found a tool that lays it all out in one place and makes it easy to look at, except for this one. So I might look at it or find what I need to find here and then go find it in a forensics tool, but this has a lot more information. So if you look, it'll tell you, here's your volume signature, it's HFS Plus, your versions, and then if you look down the list, you'll see a lot of things. When was it last mounted? What was the date? What actually happened to it? How many files are in your system, your folders? It keeps track of all this content. Block sizes, number of blocks, and then each one of these across the top has content. The biggest one is the catalog file. So the catalog file, you'll see the breakdown of it. As it starts to install, your lowest number should be Mac OS X. And then from there, as it continues, all the items as they're installed will continue building trees. So these are the branches of the trees that are aware leveled. So if you go into each one of these, you can see each item and the numeric values that are associated with that content you can break them all the way down to what they belong to. And so you can go look at any file, look at any content. These would be the pieces that are inside of the packages for apps and things like that. And if you look, you'll see it keeps track of everything. File lock, thread existing,